opening speech, which certainly will make us. There's a lot of questions and reflections. Sorry. Now we have, I'm afraid to say, not 3 panelists, but 2, because Magdalena Wojcik unexpectedly had to leave during Göran's speech, and she sends her apology for that. But we still have 2 panelists, 2 earlier Paideia alumni. And first of all, we have Torkel Wächter. He told me recently he was a father to 4 children. He used to be an airline captain, and now he is a full-time novelist. So please welcome to the stage. And we also have Ulf Lindgren, who is or used to be assistant headmaster at the French school. Used to be headmaster at the French school in Stockholm. He is also priest in the Swedish, or the Church of Sweden, and he is working in the Cathedral of Stockholm. And he is also part of the Board of Council for Jewish-Christian Collaboration. So please welcome to the stage. And now you have some time to give personal reflections or thoughts connected to what Göran just said. So, Torkel, please. And remember to keep that.
Thank you, Göran, for the address, and thank you for having me. It's very nice to be at home. Bye-bye. Hemma. Så Hausen. My father was a German Jew. He arrived in Sweden in 1938 as a refugee. He never denied this fact, but he did not talk much about it either. He was more interested in the present and the future than in the past. The post-war contract between the Kingdom of Sweden and the German Jewish refugees of the time was based on assimilation and a lack of interest for the experiences of the refugees. This suited my father and many of his peers well. Their loss of home was devastating. It was painful to look back, and it was very difficult to explain their experiences. I was born in 1961. From the few things my father said about his life in Germany, I got the impression that everything that had to do with Germany and his life there had been terrible. When my father died in 1983, he left behind some packing cases filled with letters, diaries, newspaper and magazine clippings, and his unfinished memoirs. Some 17 years ago, I was myself becoming a father for the first time. I realized that I was unable to answer the simplest question my child would ask me about our German Jewish past. I opened the boxes, and for the first time, I saw photographs of my grandparents who had been deported to Riga, where they vanished. You could say that Riga is the place where the story of my German Jewish family ends. However, there is another possible ending to that story. An ending that I, their grandson, much prefer. Probably because it is not an ending, but a continuation. This continuation has been possible thanks to the letters which Gustav, Minna, and the rest of the family wrote to each other during those years that were so difficult for our family. And above all, the letters they wrote to their youngest son, Walter, my father, when he was was in the concentration camp and in prison from March 1935 to March 1938. These letters and the regular visits kept my father from going under. My father was also the reason why Gustav and Minna never even considered leaving Germany while it was still possible. You do not leave your child when he needs your help. The letters from my grandfather and my grandmother to my father represent love in its purest form. In order to familiarize myself with this material and to work with it, I've had to learn German, a language my father never spoke with me. Therefore, I have had to learn German as an adult. It was through reading the letters from my grandfather and grandmother that I got to know them, and at the same time, I began to love their language and to develop an admiration for German culture. To re-establish the link with this culture, which for me is personified by my grandparents, I've chosen to reclaim the German citizenship the Nazis took from them. Therefore, the story of Gustav and Minna Wächter and the German Jewish family does not end when Gustav signs their death warrant on a cold day in Hamburg in December 1941. In fact, it continues more than 60 years later in a sparsely furnished office at the German embassy in Stockholm, when I sign the document that makes me a German citizen. Equally important for this continuation was my year of Jewish studies here at Paideia, which gave me a valuable insight into the Jewish context of my grandparents and a deeper understanding of Jewish thought. Today, I'm able to tell my children the stories I never heard as a child. They have all attended Hillel, the Jewish kindergarten here in Stockholm, and they do now attend the German school in Stockholm. And they do feel very much at home in Sweden. I've come to realize that the notion of home has as much to do with your family's past and the stories connected to that past as it has to do with your present. Thank you. Thank you.
4 years ago, in 2012, I started at Paideia. I had no Jewish heritage whatsoever, but already after a couple of weeks, I started to hear the same notion repeated by many different teachers. And I was struck by it because it helped me to understand why I had created my life in that way. And that is the words that God say to the first real human being, to Abraham. First thing God says is, Lech lecha, get up and go. And that is really my story. I come from Skåne, or Malmö. My family has been for at least 300 years on the countryside, just outside Malmö. It's really one of the richest places on earth. It's flooded in sugar, cream and butter. And they owned land and they were eating all this cream and sugar and butter. And I grew up in all that, sugar and butter and cream. But it was so boring. I never felt at home in that time of world. So what I started to do already as an early teenager. When I was 14, I sat in the port of Malmö on sunny Saturdays and Sundays and looked at the boats leaving, imagining I would go with them out, leaving the sugar and the cream to see something else. And so I did, and I'm still really leaving that port. I've been in Stockholm for 20 years, and I still feel that I'm trying to leave Malmö. I went to France. I lived in France for a couple of years. I went to Egypt, and I lived there. And I think that the Lech Lecha is what is really driving me, to always leave what is known and to confront what is unknown. Because in the unknown, you have new ways of thinking, new ways of looking at life. And I'm sitting where I'm sitting today, not particularly because of my years in Egypt. And I'm a priest in the Church of Sweden, absolutely because all of my talks with my Muslim friends in Cairo. I would not be where I am today without them, and without their conversation, without their troubling questions, and without their metaphors that they gave me. So in one way, I could say that I have constructed, really, my home. My home is in my head. My home is constantly changing and refurbishing it with new ideas, and I always have to leave to get new things into my home. At the same time, I don't live in the port any longer, neither at Arlanda. I have a home, and how does that home look like? Well, it looks like a museum. I've constructed a huge museum where I live, filled with different objects from my travels, but especially old furniture. So this old furniture museum, where I live, I walk around there and I don't feel that, wow, I have a fantastic house with all these old things. No, I feel that I am their guardian. I am the protector of this furniture, this mirror that hang in the palace where Gustav III lived as a young boy. I have the clock that Marie Antoinette received in 1789. And these things have survived. And I now keep them so that they shall survive even more. So in one way, in my head, I'm always trying to have new ideas and to change, but my body needs something that is not changing. So I've surrounded myself with these constant objects of the past that are now outside time. So I really define my home as timelessness, outside time. That's very peculiar, but perhaps it's also very biblical, to be moving and to be the same. To always go out of Egypt, it's the past, it's the present, and it's the future. And if you do all these things together, you are in a timelessness movement. So I should say that without any Jewish blood, I have now a lot of Jewish thoughts, and that's why I very much appreciated Barbara's words on the examination day when she said, "You are now a Jew." Now I have a Jew in my head, and I'm carrying not only the old furniture, but also carrying thoughts, ideas, and tools to understand the world around me. So that's my home.
Thank you. So now I am actually happy to tell you we have a third panelist, a volunteer who used to be a Paideia alumni at 2003, I think you said. from Netherlands, Clary Rooda. Maybe you can, because I don't know anything else about you, maybe you can introduce yourself briefly.
It's a very spontaneous action, because I was having some thoughts while listening, and I think this panel needed a woman as well. In Dutch, we have quite a number of words derived from Yiddish. One of them is bias, Yiddish word for bayi, but in Dutch it means prison, Beit Asurim. That was the first thing that came to my mind, also after the panel we had yesterday about Beit Avadim. Also, a little personal story. My mother was born in hiding in the Netherlands, 1944. So growing up, for me, Judaism was danger, was persecution. I was not allowed to touch it. For me, it was Asur at that time. And I was thinking, Beit Avadim, you could see it as a house of not knowing, lacking knowledge, being closed inside. Or perhaps have the different perspective in the Beit Avadim, in the bias, there is the Jewish knowledge. And I was not allowed to touch it from the outside. And in that respect, Paideia enabled me to build a fundament in Jewish text. And I think from that fundament, this feeling at home in the text, whether it's Torah, Talmud, Rambam, to current day philosophy, to art, that fundament enabled me to build walls, to build a roof, to build windows. And from that fundament I could go out into the world and share my knowledge. Paideia enabled me to create a common language. This Paideia alumni, we have a common language. And in that part we are a community in which I feel at home. Paideia enabled me to feel at home at the house of Judaism. That once was a bias for me, once was a prison for me. Today I'm a rabbi in the Netherlands. I'm able to share my knowledge, to teach. One of the things for me, by building a home, it's not only a home in the Jewish world. Before I came to Paideia, I worked with refugees, higher educated refugees in the Netherlands, which for me was part of my own history. When I grew up, my grandmother told me, make sure you got the knowledge, because if you have to flee, that is what you can take with you. So there was a big emphasis on learning. And for me, working with refugees, mainly Muslim refugees, I have a kind of natural connection with them. So one of my dreams for the future is to build a Beit Midrash, a madrasa, in Holland, where Jews and Muslims can study together their text. And that were just a few thoughts that came to my mind, and I thank you for the opportunity to join the panel. Many thanks to Paideia, to Barbara, to enable me to set these steps and free myself from the bias. Be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Now we have time for questions, comments, or reflections. So the floor is open.
Thank you so much to Göran and to all of the panelists. I can't see you, so I'm moving over here. I felt really touched by the comments you all made, and also want to share that I, for the first time in months, felt truly at home yesterday when all of you flew in my home community here in Stockholm. I wonder, Göran and the rest of you as well, Göran, you mentioned that maybe we need to be less focused on land and more on knowing that we've been slaves and knowing what freedom is and knowing how to treat our neighbors in a good sense. Clary, you mentioned that there is a common language that we've created here at Paideia. I wonder, how do we share this language? How do we use this high ceiling in the Stockholm Jewish community and in other communities in Europe?
First of all, another remark. When I entered this building yesterday, I noticed I did miss the old Paideia building. Because that was where I felt at home, in the library, in the kitchen, going to the offices. Being here yesterday, meeting some of my former fellows, but also getting to know other fellows that I had never met before, that is what makes me feel at home. At the same time, I think we all find different expressions of this common language. Some of us express it in art, some of us in academic studies, some of us as rabbis. But I think when we are here, if you put us in the room like yesterday and have a Chavruta session over Talmud, that's the common language. And how you translate it into our daily lives now, that's up to us. And I think that's one of the things that Paideia taught me. When you have the knowledge, it's up to me to make it relevant for the world today. And I think that's one of the power of Paideia, that we all express it in different ways, but it's all derived from the same source.
Okay. I think you have all touched a special common theme, and that is we have gone from focusing on the physical home and the territory, I think yesterday, Bayit, the house, the land, to today the Gemeinschaft, as Göran spoke of, and you spoke of. My home is in my head, and Michael described how you created your home through. So, and I think that tells something about a change of the political reality. I think we have to sort of disconnect the physical experience of a home from the mental, and find, and also I remember yesterday, the youngest speaker yesterday was a Paideia student who was 24 and said, my home is on the internet. That I thought, well, I think internet is more of an agora, an open place, a public place, but it's also for a new generation, including myself, not so young, as a home, because you can find both the public space, the dialogue with the others, and home with you can create your family with in a virtual reality. And I think, looking on the European theme as Göran touched upon, I think in the future we have to see that we can create homelands within our common Europe. I think we could take Stockholm as an example. This Bayit physical house is a home for the Jewish, not only congregation, for the Jews of Sweden and Stockholm and our international guests, but it's really a physical home. But it doesn't take the home from others living in the same Stockholm, and we share the Stockholm as our home, both physical and mental. And I think that's a way of thinking that is necessary to go on to in the future and to find political solutions.
Can I say something? Please. Thank you. No, I think I completely agree in a general sense, but I want to emphasize, and I think I did that, that I believe that we somehow tend to jump over and a bit underestimate the conditions for the formation of ourselves, or how do we become that person who sits on the internet and then creates his family. Or that. There is an intimate and existential dimension to home, to be in an environment where we sort of take shape initially. Early values are very much associated with these very early experiences. We are not born, I would say, human beings. We are human beings in a biological sense, but human beings in what we mean to be a mensch. That sort of happens in a process, and we also know that young humans that are not somehow grow up isolated from this will not develop skills like language. So this doesn't come naturally. So this is just to emphasize, in my view, that we should not underestimate the existential dimension. It tends to be, we somehow can later in life say, well, I feel at home, and that's good. We can feel at home in many places and at the internet or wherever. But that somehow presumes that we have established ourselves, either if it's in the boring landscape of southern Sweden with its sugar, butter and anything, that it's still, that's where you came about. And then we gave you all that confidence and all that sugar and energy that you could take with you when you went out in the world. And this is my take on it, and I think this is what we are seeing today is an existential homelessness that I can among young people that I see developing. That has to do with the disconnection, can one say so, between the need, the existential need of that primordial need even, and the lack of ability to enter into the world as it is. I guess I clearly think of, and perhaps it's really a particular problem we have, but I'm really afraid what I see among younger generations, many today. A lack of hope, a lack of sense of belonging that can be compensated temporarily by internet, I would say, and communities on the net. But when things go bad, and when you need that warmth and when you need that unconditional sense of place, in which I think I wrote in my book, where you don't have to say that much to be heard or understood, and you don't want to show yourself that much to be seen. I think these are still very, very essential things, and there is a temptation to forget that, I think, in the world today. It seems too easy to create all these relationships. Well, as I say, that's where I come from.
Thank you. We have 5 or maybe 6 people waiting for the microphone and approximately 10 minutes left. So I have to ask you to be brief.
Thank you, Göran, and others for very lot of food for thought. I would like to come back on Europe, the question of generations also, generation question. When God took us out of Egypt, He realized that our home was Egypt, so He didn't let us into the promised land. We had to be a new generation in the desert. Now, the EU is a very new project. Maybe there is a generation problem between young people born into the EU, which we could see after the Brexit results and how the young generation was very upset, and the older generation, which has a home in the nation state. What's your opinion on that, Göran?
I don't know. Maybe we could answer, but I think you're asking important questions about the, and I think we should. I think young people. It's a generalization that young people voted against Brexit. It's true in the urbanized areas of the UK they did, but I'm still worried about younger generations too when it comes to the attraction of nationalism, all kinds of other homes that might be out there wanting their attention.
Göran, thank you very much for a brilliant presentation as always. Just as an aside, don't be so worried about the young. I remember my parents' generation worrying about me, and I can hear that worry in your voice. It's part of getting older, okay?
Yeah, I add that to my. I absolutely say.
I'd like to rehabilitate Gesellschaft, the nation state, which we construe today as a Gemeinschaft, started as a Gesellschaft, right? When the borders of the tribe were extended to include all those unwashed peasants and others who spoke the same dialect, and therefore that gave us a common identity against the guys across the river who spoke a different dialect. So if that could be extended, I can easily imagine extending what is today the Gemeinschaft of the nation state into a Gemeinschaft of Europeans, if we manage to get the founding myth right. And here there is a piece of optimism coming from the Balkans of all places. It was not only the home of murderous nationalism, it was also the home of people who genuinely thought of themselves as being Yugoslav as opposed to the failed dream of being Soviet. And to illustrate that, in the beginnings of the war, somebody, probably a Serb nationalist, wrote on the wall of the Sarajevo post office, "This is Serbia." And somebody answered him saying, "You're wrong, asshole, this is a post office." And somebody didn't say, "This is Bosnia." He said, "It's a post office."
Right.
People are able to stand up to for their post office. It's not all gloom and despair.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was gloom and despair, but we have tried the founding myth thing, and that was what the European Union tried to do, and then with the constitutions and all this, and some even wanted to have it as a Judeo-Christian project, and what have you of mythology. And that has made me even more convinced that, because we see what is happening in all this, that it has to be based on what I call them strong moments of Gesellschaft. People have to realize this is the absolute best solution for solving whatever problems we are having. And now people suddenly believe that this is not the solution. The solution is to vote for Le Pen or Brexit or whatever it have you in Sweden Democrats. And we all know that that is, putting your head in the sand and doing absolutely counterproductive thing today. I agree with you that the nation state to a large extent was a Gesellschaft thing, absolutely. But the mythology, at least in Sweden, worked to create a sense of solidarity that was very strong, that reminded you of a Gemeinschaft, society. This is disappearing to some extent. Poland is in a different case, of course. We had this large Jewish minority, so there wasn't a Polish nation for all inhabitants in practice. So, but it's complicated. But I insist that we have to be much better in political construction of good institutions. We need them badly because we're going to get increasingly worse institutions.
Göran, thank you for making me conscious of the irrelevance of the European Union for any feeling of being at home. It's absolutely not relevant, and Brexit and all these other prove that many other people recognize that that's not going to give us a sense of of being at home. On the other hand, your feeling about federation, and we've discussed this one time, so I'm not exactly sure what you mean by federation, but let me just say that as I understand, there's a Swiss federation, and here you have 3 different languages and 3 different cultures that somehow make themselves federal and are able to function. But what makes you think that the numerous countries of Europe would be able to function and give people a sense of being at home in a kind of a federation that would be anything like a Swiss federation? In other words, isn't there a change when quantity becomes really significant? It affects quality.
Well, it has to be different, that's for sure. But as I say, it's an issue for me of I need something to believe in, and that's the only idea in town that I think has, at least on paper, something that could we work on. Anything else is of course, it has to be a wholly different animal from, of course, the US Federation, and also from the Swiss Federation. This is something else. But the fact that we are already a community is established by the European Union, that it has already more or less defined who and why did it work with 28 nations? Well, it didn't work.
It didn't.
Yeah, but the idea of a federation encompassing 2025 is not impossible. But this is utopia. But you know, I'm with you. I also believe in the Messiah.
Okay, we have 3 questions left before Dr. Ingrid Blomfors will put her remarks. So,
Of course I do.
Thank you. When listening to all the presentation and also the remarks, it was extremely strong, the sensation of hearing in my head the words from Yehuda Levi, this scholar from medieval time, saying, "Ani b'ma'arav v'libi b'mizrach." My body is in the west, but my head and my heart is in the east. I think that one idea that is to put everything in one place, maybe it's just an illusion. Maybe the body is in the house, but the idea, the thoughts, maybe the body is with the cream and the butter and needs all that, but if you don't let the possibility that the thoughts, that the dreams are going to another place, they have to leave, they need this freedom, because if not, the house, the bite, becomes this Dutch word, Bais, which is a prison. If the bait doesn't have a window forward, it's not only that it doesn't let people coming in, it's also it doesn't leave yourself to flourish outside. And actually in Hebrew there is also a very nice visual issue, because when you close the window, the bed becomes a chet, which means also a word which is sin, a chet, with no window outside. So the idea, the house, includes everything of yourself. The chet, the chet that doesn't let you outside. The idea that the house needs to include yourself, your body, but also all your ideas may become very dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Uriel. I'm a former fellow. I think if the purpose of the conference was to create more clarity in the concept of home, I think we explore more the complexity and the difficulties, which I think is also a very good outcome. But my question to Göran, also to a certain extent to the whole panel, you were talking before about the little town in Sweden where you grew up, and you ended up talking about the European Union. So my question to you would be, is home where we come from or where we want to go? Is something we are marching forward, so to speak, home, or is where we come from?
Well, I try to say that there is a connection between being at home or being provided with that existential home that is making us into, and then I find that, and the ability to go out in order to be someone in the world and make the world our own, as I say. We have first to link ourselves. The human, this is really very deep in me. We are not automatically in the world. The whole story of Gan Eden and out of paradise is being one with the world. We are separated from the world. We become because we eat of the tree of knowledge, and we become this animal that has a problem with the world, in the sense that we need to connect to it. We need to connect to the world. And I think the notion of home, by it, is a precondition for connecting to the larger world. And so there is a link. And it's complicated. And we said it's not a simple notion. But absolutely, we need to go out. And I said the Jewish home, the Jewish Bible, must be an open home from our own experience, from our own mythology, from our rituals, from our texts. It's an open home. It has to be, and it has to be always striving to that. And I was just asked if I was serious about believing in Messiah. Well, in a way I am. Because I think there is the notion of hope in Jewish civilization is crucial. And we hope for a better, we hope for justice, we hope for all kinds of things, because otherwise it would be unbearable to live, especially if you were a Jew in certain periods of time. Why the hell would you continue being a Jew if you didn't have hope? So I think these things are all interconnected, and I think we are in deep need of that element in our society. And I think we can, in the Jewish civilization, in Jewish world, we have good sources for that, to be hopeful. And the idea of Messiah, although not literally, is a good idea.
So we have the last question or comments from Lena.
No, it's a short question, but maybe not for now because we are short of time. I was intrigued, Göran, by the notion of language also, to adding it as a concept of home. And I was thinking while listening to all of you, and the current situation in Sweden, in Europe, with the flood of refugees who actually are leaving their homes. The adults have had a home, but the children, the babies who are coming to the various places. So my question would be, could language, their language, be a starting point for creating a new home wherever they end up?
It certainly is for the parents. That's also my experience, that they will always be at home, more at home, at least initially in the language which their mother tongue, as you say. Even if it's, I'm not exaggerating, but it is a point of strength to be able to. But absolutely, I think it's imperative that the younger generations that come as soon as possible are able to communicate in a lingua franca, in the language, in the country in which this is creating a problem for it, because language is terrible. And language carries with it also moods of thought, moods of imagination, and we had many experiments with sort of, keep your own language, and to some extent I think one should do that because it gives you a link to your past. That's for sure. But if you want to be at home in this larger community, language is crucial. So it's a difficult issue. It's very difficult.
Could I just add a personal experience there? As I said before, I worked 10 years at the French school, Lycée Français, and there we had a lot of kids from North Africa. The parents were from Morocco and Tunisia, so they spoke
Arabic and French, and the children were born in Sweden. They spoke Swedish, so they had 3 languages. Very often in the same classroom, I had persons from the same city in Morocco or Tunisia, living now in the same suburb in Stockholm, speaking the 3 languages. One of the kids said, I have 3 homes. I can move, and I can be in Sweden, in France, in Morocco. The other one said, I have no home. I can speak no languages really good, so I'm homeless, I'm languageless, I'm nobody. And they had exactly the same background, and they spoke the same level of French and Swedish, but they experienced it so differently. And that's going back to Göran, what you said, it's the personal, existential experience of who are you, from where are you, and they can be identical individuals, but they can feel it. So there's not one answer to the whole question.
I think language is very important. It's the key to getting along in a society. But I also think that Göran and I, maybe you don't agree on this, that we are examples of how you inherit something from a parent that is or has been a refugee. And that does not necessarily have to be something negative, but you do inherit it, I think. And well, I talked with you, Aldo, yesterday about this, and I know that there are many of you who have parents who were refugees. And I do think that we share some experiences that we don't share with people who do not have that experience of a parent who was a refugee.
Okay, thank you very much, all 3 panelists, and Göran, thank you for your reflection. For the next participant. So now I ask Dr. Ingrid Domfors to step forward to make the final reflections or remarks. Dr. Domfors is an Associate Professor of History and Director of the Living History Forum. And previously she worked as a head of the Grundtvig Institute, which is an institution that aimed at strengthening the community college and the public education in Swedish society. So, welcome. Are you ready?
We'll see. Yeah.
Can you hear her?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So I'm going to end this session by sharing a few thoughts on the historical framework in which the new Paideia Folkhögskola will be established and placed. Since this first Jewish Folkhögskola is the first ever, I believe, I'd like to take a closer look at the narrative in which the new school will be part of. And as any narrative, also this one has several branches, and I would like to mention 2. Swedish folkbildning and the Lehrhaus, the House of Learning. But let me start by quoting Albert Einstein, who once said that everything that is valuable in human society depends on the opportunity the individual is given to develop, unquote. I believe that our own ideas, attitudes, and feelings about ways of learning come from your own experience. So I thought I'd start by telling you a few words about my own. My first years of study were not very successful. My mind was constantly elsewhere, and I left elementary and secondary school with some pretty bad grades. My mother was worried about what would become of me. For her, she was a girl. Education was something very important growing up in an intellectual and cultural environment in Vienna back in the 1930s. Her own dreams of going to university died with the Holocaust, along with all her family. The Kindertransport saved her life to Sweden, but she was never able to pick up formal education again. My father, on the other side, didn't care too much about education. He thought it was more important to get a job, an income of my own, and to be independent, which I got and became. Then, at the age of 20, and just by chance, I came across a folkhögskola, a people's high school in Ljungskile, a beautiful small town on the west coast of Sweden. This school was different. It had an open and inclusive atmosphere. There was a concert hall, performances in jazz and folk music almost every evening, classes in drama and choir singing too. The door to the library, and as far as I remember, also the door to the kitchen, was open 24 hours. The teachers were dedicated and loved their work. The students, a real mix, some whom later went on to become lifelong friends. It was the place for people like me, adults who'd never been greatly engaged or inspired by our earlier traditional schooling. We were now giving a second chance. I instantly fell in love with that place, a love that lasted. For me, it became the perfect home for learning, for personal and spiritual growth, friendship, and well, yes, academic studies, finally. Now, this experience is not entirely unique to me, not at all. For my generation and older Swedes, it was indeed common and universal. We were part of a wider, very Scandinavian tradition, folkbildning, the people's education. In fact, it was not a Swede, but a Dane, the pastor, philosopher, and teacher Nikolai Fredrik Severin Grundtvig, who is considered the founding father of this particular type of education. You'll find his bust placed centrally in most people's high school right across Scandinavia. Mottos such as lifelong learning, educating the whole person, and learning for the benefit of life come from him. These educational mottos, ideas, became a key component in the later growth of the Nordic welfare model in general, and as an approach to learning in particular, that each and everyone should have access to education and to training, and that this specific form of adult education should primarily be for those who came from non-academic homes. Today in Sweden, lots of people still take part in folkbildning, not just in the people's high school, but on courses, in study circles, and with cultural activities. And these are made possible through a national network of adult learning institutions, such as ABF, the Workers' Educational Association, or Vuxenskolan, or Folkuniversitetet, and others. It's a great Swedish tradition of a liberal, non-formal education free from close national controls. I do not have to tell this audience that people who are well educated, well informed, and actively engaged with each other and their communities are vital for any real democracy. They are the guardians and drivers of any healthy, humane community or society where ideas of equality and the practices of social justice can continue to evolve. Folkbildning play a key role for ordinary people as Sweden and its society industrialized, modernized, and grew rich in overcoming the deep divisions in a society few would recognize today. Of course, any concept of folk, of a people, can and should trouble many historians, or indeed anyone who may not apparently belong to that concept. Indeed, it can be said that for all his liberal instincts, Grundtvig clearly seemed to think that the people meant his people. So the Danish people rooted in Danish soil, in Danish history, and within the Danish Christian church. So what of those who were not Christian? Did Grundtvig's folk include the Jews? Well, the short answer is no, probably not. And like so many times in the Jewish diaspora, Jews living in Denmark faced a choice: become like us, or remain on the outside if you must stay here. Now, these are not just voices heard in Grundtvig's time, nor voices just addressed to Jews. The echo from the past is to be heard also in our present societies. This brings me to a Jewish tradition, an equivalent, one can say, of folkbildning I referred to earlier, that also stands behind Paideia Folkhögskola and brings us to Germany in the late 19th century, to the Lehrhaus, or the House of Jewish Learning, and the German concept of Bildung. Bildung was a concept adopted by German Jews, who found themselves on the margins of the wider German community, but wanting, even longing to be part of it, at home in it, if you like. A concept which, as it developed, came to be of great importance for the German Jewish identity. And according to the Lehrhaus project, it didn't matter where you came from. If you came from a religious Jewish home or a secular one, if you were a woman or a man, what matters were where you were heading. Bildung opened up choices in life for any individual, and thereby being able to shape your own life and future. Learning the humanities was about becoming a better person, and so being part of a better world. This was the context in which the theologian, philosopher, and translator Franz Rosenzweig founded his first Lehrhaus, the House of Jewish Learning, in Frankfurt, 1920. And as a former Paideia student, David Schubert, is he here? No. Wrote in a very interesting essay on Rosenzweig, the very basis of such an education was in dialogue, in conversations, with questions and counter-questions. Dialogue with other people, rather than merely accumulating knowledge. So, Schubert writes, "Lernen means an ongoing discovery of identity, for students as well as for teachers. The main focus of that approach are not books, but rather the living encounter," unquote. So the Lehrhaus worked as a free academy, an arena for dialogue and education for people who sought a deeper humanistic and theological understanding of Jewish culture, often in relation to and in dialogue with the German culture. A home for seeking a Jewish identity, a sense of place, and of belonging to a wider national home. After the first Lehrhaus had opened in Frankfurt, it was soon followed in other German cities such as Berlin, Stuttgart, Cologne, Karlsbad, Breslau, Munich, and others. Many prominent Jewish culture figures and intellectuals actively contributed, such as Gershom Scholem, and Martin Buber. After the death of Franz Rosenzweig, Buber continued his friend and colleague's work. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, the Lehrhaus had a new task. It became a place of comfort, a meeting place, a place for spiritual resistance. In 1938, they were finally closed. The same year, 1938, the movement of Kindertransport started to bring Jewish kids out of Germany and Austria. And today, Those opportunities Einstein described for truly any individual, in any community, and across all cultural differences are as vital as ever. Let me round up by quoting Malala, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who said, quote, "If you go anywhere, even paradise, you will miss your home." All too often, this is the story, the history and faith of so many people today. Which is why I trust the traditions of folkbildning and the Lehrhaus and their best ideals will find a home for all to find in and with the new Paideia Folkhögskola. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. This is the end of this session, and now we are expecting lunch, so I would like to invite you for lunch. And today it will be at the Paideia floor, the third floor in the old house. And the program will continue at the same floor, 2:45. Okay, thank you.